we start life with a clean sheet as regards memory. There's a few people that can recall things that before death, before the birth of this life. But most of us seem to start with, complete lack of memory. Now, that situation, therefore, doesn't speak to you of your oneness with all creation. You just find that you are and start to get to grips with it. Presumably, Mum comes into your field of consciousness gradually as a being external to yourself, that's very important as regards your welfare and comfort, and you're hungry and now you're not, and seems to rely your welfare on the ministrations of this external source. What I mean to say by all this is that we start from an isolation, a loneliness. I won't say quite a separateness because there is no other, but there is no plurality either. And although we tend to think of oneness as a wonderful state, oneness in total ignorance is desperately in need of external help. And of course, Mum comes to the rescue in this regard. And suddenly there's warmth and there's caress and there's food, as I understand it. And the sound and the scent of her and the feel of her is all associated with this goodness, as you see it, that you need. But it is need, and at times it's not there, and at other times it's there and fulfilled. So I think we must be experiencing a separateness and need. I want to jump to the greater scale of things in living generally, that our person who doesn't feel eternally satisfied and all needs met. And I think this is the foundation of our individuality and separateness. So to rescue us into all satisfaction and contentment, we need to move from such a state to such a state. Our philosophy, therefore, as regards meeting our needs, has to be individualistic, has to be focusing on your need. And interestingly, of course, we find that if we focus on the needs of others, we start to lose this sense of separate, isolated self, and and the dominance of the needs of such. And this is a great relief, a great joy, a great pleasure, to find that you are a blessing to someone, confirmed by their appreciation. If it's not confirmed, you're not clear you're being a blessing, but if it's confirmed by their appreciation, then, we just start to lose that total obsession, if you like, with our own needs. They just don't seem to press on us so much. And we're getting joy in meeting other people's needs. Now, you might say you don't want to do this to excess because if you forget to eat yourself, of course, you die. And the body usually doesn't let you do this. It cries out with such pressure that you do come to your own rescue and eat something, for instance, rather than give all your food away. But perhaps to some extent this line of reasoning here in this recording gives some explanation as to why our philosophies of enlightenment, our religions and our philosophy in general, appear so individualistic and obsessed with the perfection of the self, yourself and individual selves, rather than the oneness of all life or all creation. I think I would like to see it a step further, which is the oneness of creation that I'm valuing is not as if all things were a single being. In other words, I'm not visualizing, if you like, in the religious view, merging with God. I think sometimes expressed as the drop of water returning to the ocean and, just blending in with it. My ideal oneness is of the individual plurality of individuality in a cooperative, harmonious, joyful, peaceful, etc. whole. In other words, it's a communal notion of oneness rather than a personal singularity, isolated, single person oneness of all creation. My sort of notion of the perfect is an infinite ever-growing number of individuals, all of them, if you like, delightfully different, but wonderfully, harmoniously motivated, such that, well, in some sense there's a wonderful complexity. Not a single entity, but an ever-expanding, well, loving family. What do you think? Let me pause. Yes, I think that to rescue the individual isolated self has to be a philosophy for the individual isolated self that leads such to this wonderful goal, as I envisage it, of this heavenly host, if you like. Of course, I am aware that my heavenly host has a principle, a father, a dad figure, which I've definitely borrowed from the Jesus story. And now and again I wrestle with the thought that perhaps as a dad I in many ways don't want to be superior to my kids. I want them to be my equal, that they may enjoy the fullness of life that I enjoy. But at the same time, I still so appreciate the fact that they see me as Dad. Just feel it makes it all so worthwhile. There's that a bit of self-ego still lurking there. And they seem to be happy to continue to recognize me as Dad too. It's not a burden to them, but a joy, because they love me. Bless them. Well, I don't know. What do you think of this? Bless you too. Thank you, Dad. Oh, a thing I was much focused on before putting this recording into action like this is whether I should be seeing, it's a gender problem, isn't it? I'm seeing God as Dad, or should I be seeing God as Divine Mother, or both, Heavenly Father and Divine Mother? And then I thought, well, and also as dearest friend. So then I got this Trinity, and wasn't quite happy with that, because I felt I was seeing my God now as three persons, with the eternal Trinity argument problem going on in the back of my mind. Well, I haven't yet received the solution to this dilemma. I think it's coming, that you'll be most successful, most happy and content if you bear in mind it's your God. If you see God as Dad, well, that's fine. If you see God as Mum, that's fine. If you see God as dearest friend, that's fine. Do whatever you see as your God for all it's worth, and you trust that will lead you to anything that is better than that, if there is anything better than that. It's a sort of deep-rooted faith in you that it will all be okay. That who or whatever God is, He'll certainly be able to do it right for you. And I say certainly as an assertion of faith, not of knowledge, but as an intentional trust that I delight in. We call it faith, don't we? I don't know, but I choose to believe. And it's a case of choosing to believe that which is the most beneficial, that which leads to, as you see it, the greatest fullness of life, or that which you value. Bless you. Thank you, Dad. Oh, well, it occurs to me that when we start life as a baby, or even in the womb, we actually do have memories of something else before that moment, that time. Then its absence from us, or our growing awareness of its no longer being the case, it's something in the past, would presumably make us feel at some loss, some isolation. in a state of some need or want or desire for presumably those things to come to mind again, or if there have been terrible things, escaping from it, I suppose. I don't know. But do you see, either way, whether the memory's wiped clean, which it may still tend to be as, I don't know, we develop in the womb or develop as a young baby, we might start to lose any memories we did come furnished with, and feel the loneliness because of the clean sheet of memory, if you like. The isolation starts to dawn on us in the way that I've said here. Or we may, if that's not the case, in being aware of that which was before but not now, feel an isolation, a loneliness for that reason. Either way, we get the same outcome as I see it. This may sound very negative, but namely that we feel alone and in need of that which is from outside of us, not within us any longer. And of course I'm assuming that this becomes our principal preoccupation that needs somehow to be dealt with or resolved or overcome or we need to be reconciled with. And hence our philosophies, our religions, our is it paradigm? I'm not sure if that's the word. Our solution anyway seems very individualistic. It's for the isolated person. But even so, of course, with the understanding that this isolation has to be, as I say, overcome or resolved, something that brings all of the environment into a oneness, but a oneness in the way that I've outlined here in this recording, rather than a oneness of an isolated single being. Thank you, Dan. I'm wondering how much our personhood is the consequence of Mum projecting personhood onto us. If I might take possibly a fanciful view for a moment, she's holding her baby and this is life, this is a potential, this is, there's going to be a little boy or a little girl and is ideally going to be a lovely person, like myself, of course. We may well be thinking, in some sense, they'll have the values that I value. She's worshipping this little soul just as she worships her God. Her God is personification of what she values, ideally, as I understand it. And her baby is also. So she's, by projecting, I think I also mean, as a consequence, behaving towards this little soul as the being that she values this little soul to be becoming. And she's fashioning such in her care and ministrations accordingly. I'm not quite sure how reliable this notion is, but in some sense that the child in her arms, if it is in her arms, is responding accordingly to the way they are being cared for. And in some sense becoming, therefore, the person that mum is imagining, so that the lack of personal care, the needs of the child might be met, but not really much what we might call loving care going on, personal interrelating, and the next stage on playing peekaboo and talking, and well, she may be really enlightened, as I understand it, and be chatting to baby long before even born. But if we can imagine a mum that doesn't do that, is not playful, is not naturally warm and loving, but shall we say, relatively speaking, cold and distant, then perhaps the child develops accordingly. Still has needs, but the needs are not met by a particularly warm and loving experience, but just the need of a person and the complexity of another person, but simply met by the needs being met. Crying, so was fed, was crying because of, needing to be changed, so was changed, but not really loving interaction going on, by which I do mean the complexity of mum's responses when she's focused on her desired future for her child. I think I'm describing a situation of maternal deprivation, therefore, possibly being present for some children. And I'm surmising that, therefore, the child grows up to be a person that doesn't recognize personhood, doesn't really treat others as persons with feelings, nor is able to empathize with others as persons, because they have not received personhood as such themselves, or that their personhood is greatly deprived. A modest example of this might be someone who's brought up in a very strict, rule-based environment, where the rules are what determine one's welfare, not the loving kindness of those around. That one's access to what one's needs are is determined by rules, not personal individual relationship. As if one's going through life in a machine rather than in a fellowship. Yeah, I think that's it. And that our society, because it tends to be rule-based, leaves just about all of us, to some extent, with this dilemma. And I think it is a dilemma, in the sense that personhood is held to be of greater value and fundamental need to our being than simply objecthood in a world of objects, where each object has its defined reaction pre-specified to any other object that it comes into contact with. I put it in those deliberately sterile terms to accentuate what I'm trying to get hold of. Whereas a living, flowing person among persons is wonderfully complex and sees each person as an individual and a right to be an individual, but a potential blessing even so. Whereas the rule-based society approach ignores individuality and insists on a homogeneous reaction to any specified interaction you might have. The difference between the secular world as seen from the top, the state running its population, the difference of that to Jesus says, I'm come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I've called you friend. And okay, he says that in the context of, because I've told you the things that are important to me, I've told you all things. I'm not treating you as a servant, as a function in my welfare of my house. I'm treating you as a friend, as an equal, not as a serf or some inferior being. And I think this is what we find in general so liberating and what we really need. It speaks to us from our position of some sterility of impersonal experience. I was going to say of living, and I think I mean of not living. That real living is not that legalistic, rule-based pattern of behavior, but actions that flow from the spontaneity of the situation, but in our loving precondition that's within us for each other, so that we're doing, if you like, we're keeping the commandments, not as commandments, but as principles that we have found to be true for us. We know when to break the rules, so to speak. They're not rules. We know when the principle applies and when it doesn't, perhaps because they're in hierarchy. I mean, with the one at the top being that we truly love one another, truly want the welfare of all, don't necessarily know how to achieve it, can't quite conceive of it at all completely yet, but that we're ever moving in that direction. Yes. Thank you, Dad. I've got it somewhere around 25 minutes into this recording that the way ahead for humanity is not in meeting all human needs from the state. That's to make humanity into a machine, and we will feel desperately alone and deprived and unhappy. It won't, the needs are met but not our happiness. Do you see? That it would fundamentally destroy humanity, all that you actually truly value, which is, I'm not sure how to put it quite, but not this machine. Not to turn society into a wonderful machine, but society into a wonderful society. Not to destroy the family in order to have a well-working, organized state, but that the state becomes a wonderful, heavenly host. And that is what we will find is our true need, and therefore our goal.